Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. I truly enjoy every time we get together with this gentleman because he looks at our everyday lives through the eyes of science. And when you do that, you have validation, you have accuracy. It's not just an opinion. There's things that back it up. Today, we're going to look at something I think we can all relate to these days: uncertainty, doubt, and fear in our lives. There's a lot going on, a lot of changes going on, a lot of things that leave us uncomfortable, and then occasionally there's things that present themselves that put even more doubt and call it fear. He has been working decades in the science area, has had many aha, eureka moments, and many fantastic discoveries, and has provided papers, teaching, authored a lot of great things, including a memoir. And he's Grant Venerable. He's back with us. Hey, Grant, how you doing today?
Fine, Stephen. How are you doing?
Really good, really good. And we didn't get together last week because there was a situation that presented itself in terms of your communication technology. And I'd love to start there because it's one of those things that when it pops up, it just adds more doubt and fear within our lives, and understandably so. But this was a situation with your internet or phone
That's right.
service?
Yeah.
What happened?
There's an overlapping complexity that's bombarding the society. And how do we deal with it? Well, there's really two universes to be considered. There's a universe in which every single human being is no more than a statistic in a microstate of an infinitely large system. And that system has just millions, billions of microstates. What is a microstate? It's a tiny little state. Now, we all live like in the moment. That would be a state. We're living in a particular state. We're doing a transaction at the market or the store. But right now, we're doing this transaction online, on the air. And I had an unexpected transaction last week that disenabled me from participating in the podcast. Namely, my cable TV wasn't working. I called the Infinity Comcast company and I couldn't reach them. I got a message from them that said this was AT&T and you owe us money. Therefore, we shut off your service. Now, I don't remember all the order of events of when the service was shut off and all that. I do know I did reach, once I got my phone service restored, I reached the executive offices of Infinity Comcast up in Philadelphia and talked to an executive manager to the CEO, who told me they had a problem with hackers. And hackers have been coming in on their own telephone service and the telephone services of other vendors that a person might be subscribing to. In my case, it was AT&T, in which they tell you, no, they don't even say it. It's not Comcast. They just said, well, this is AT&T and your service has been shut off. You only be restored with a penalty of at least $40, and you must pay in order to restore the service. I did get the service restored. It was like an extortion, but it wasn't. It was from a hacker, and that's what the Comcast people advised me. This is happening more and more.
Wow.
People think they're talking to a company. They're talking to a company whose voices and messaging has been used by hackers. We don't know if this is coming in from Russia, China, wherever. It doesn't matter. We're all connected now on this great big cyber net, all over planet Earth. Now, that's the introduction to what I really want to say
Mm.
is that we live in two universes simultaneously. And if we stay in one of them, it leads us into heartache, confusion, and frustration, and it deepens whatever doubts and fears that we're nursing at the moment. So there's been a lot of that, and the news media transports various supposed news, and we really can't tell unless we shift out of that universe and get into our own personal universe. It sounds simple. Actually, it is simple. When one stays rooted in one's personal purpose, it changes the color of the whole environment and the universe in which we're occupying. And then other things can kick in that guide us. Now, that's where it really gets strange, interesting, and powerful because I'm jockeying a number of projects all at once. And sometimes I might be tempted to feel, oh, I can't, I'm really overwhelmed here. But I've had enough experience. And that experience came actually from journalizing my life, probably since junior high school, using week at a glance calendars.
Mm-hmm.
And my father was such an organized man that I picked up his traits of journalizing. So I was able to compose a memoir, which I thought was just going to be a simple reporting of my history, my childhood, my life events, my education. But it got to be much more as this continued through all of my careers. And I say all of them, probably had 6 or 7 by now. And I got none of them. I mean, they were jobs. Most of them were jobs. But I got none of them through any normal application process because all of the applications I filed came to naught. I was hoping to get interviews to be an assistant professor of chemistry when I graduated from University of Chicago. And we were in the middle of a dizzy, of not a depression, but it was a deep recession that came on all of a sudden. Because I was an academic, I was not as tuned to national economic events, but they were happening anyway. In 1970, after graduation, I had filed 200 letters of applications to various colleges and universities to be a chemistry professor. And I got nary an interview from anyone. Had I finished a year before, the market was just had plenty of jobs. The really top students, of which I'd have to include myself, were getting not just interviews, but they were getting actual jobs in great universities. And they were getting as many as 4 to 5 offers for a job. And I got nothing in 1970, 71, even during my postdoctoral study, which I had set up maybe 2 years before graduating. And then I'd even set up for a possible position in the University of California at one of its great campuses of science and technology. And I did get an interview, but that was arranged for prior by developing a relationship with that department through friends in my graduate school environment. And what happened? There were 2 entities involved. There was the chemistry department, which had many fine professors and researchers and Nobel Prize winners, and they had offered me a job to come in it would have been fall of 1971. And a week later, the chair wrote me back and said something happened. It was akin to this event last week when the wires got crossed and I thought I was talking to Comcast, and it was a hacker posing as AT&T, and if I had paid that as AT&T, I would have been out $300 to a hacker unknown. So there was that event at this UC campus that said, we don't know what happened. The college, the undergraduate college that was supposed to hire you, it didn't come through with its part of the agreement. And the job just dropped. It just disappeared. And I was so upset and ashamed and embarrassed. I mean, there was no reason to be ashamed. It wasn't my fault. But I was a young guy. I was only 28 years of age. And for that to happen to someone at that age, when you're just starting out, who's trained for 10 years in higher education, it was like, what's going on here? Well, the memoir and journalizing my life enabled me to collect all of those instances, both the good and the bad and the indifferent. But the big outcome just in the last few years came as I began to look at the news and realize I could begin to see patterns of behavior in the society, in the economy, in the politics of the society, into what's going on. And I never dreamt that my memoir was going to be something of a commentary about how human beings, human American citizens, live in many different kinds of universes. But there's two main kinds that I really want to get into. One is the universe of people as statistics, as microstates. Nobody knows you. You're a statistic in a collection. The other kind of universe is a very private, personal universe. It's how you live your life from week to week, day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute, including this podcast interview. What happens if you're a good enough scientist who develops an ability with statistical collections of data outcomes in your experiments in the field of whatever? It could be chemistry, it could be social psychology. But all those fields begin to merge in my mind, and many people who do this. If you've had a good enough education, I don't mean a crank out the facts education and memorize the facts. It's where you're working on open-ended projects with no simple answers, because you're the first time on planet Earth anyone has looked for an answer to the particular question. That was getting me ready for a life I didn't know I was going to have, but I was ready for it. And so as I look back, and what I'm doing now is getting ready to change my venue to California. So I'm packing up. I'm dealing with, selling my home and buying I've already rented an apartment out in the Palm Springs area. So,
all right, you know what, Graham? I love this. So let's look at that move that you're making, that you're working on. How did you employ science to arrive at why it's a reasonable change in your life? Moving, there's a lot of fear involved in that. They say it's one of the top 2-3 stressful things that we can do in life.
It is.
Yeah. So how did you arrive at that?
I'll give you the simple answer first.
Sure.
We may not get past the simple answer. The simple answer is one begins to rely on the invisible realm of existence, which people access through humanities fields, good literature that records what humans in the past, how they've solved problems. It includes theology. It includes psychology. It includes with dealing with hidden, invisible entities that most people conditioned to this Western world of concrete logical rationalism have trouble with. That logical rationalism needs to deal with concrete stuff, finite, concrete stuff. If it can't get that, wrap its arms around that, it can't deal. The answers, how do you do something like moving, becomes daunting, except that one falls back into the core values of what I call the human community that you've grown up with and that you've adopted and been constantly around similar beings all your life. That community has been expressed in scriptural literature, particularly in the religions I grew up in, like where 2 or 3 are gathered, there I am to help you with your life. Well, the I in that instance is this, what's called a divine presence and a divine entity. Well, in an industrial high-tech era, people don't have much use for divine entities anymore. But yet, in the community, there is a something there that physics has just got its arms around, called gravity, discovering gravity waves, which took 50 years to develop the instruments to discover something that was hardly there because it's so weak and it needs the most powerful sensitive instruments. It's as if it were not there, but it is there. And then the other one, the big discovery, is quantum entanglement, which says that 2 related particles that may begin their existence together just a few nanometers apart, if one of those particles is taken 12 billion light years away, it's still connected and in whatever communication it is with the original particle it was born with. The same with people. People quantumly entangle without knowing it because they come from the same communities of life. And if they wander out of those communities, it breaks the connection with others in those communities. And those communities develop answers. So I'm in a position now, if I run into a roadblock, or it looks like a roadblock, how am I going to get this agreement put together and get lending and money transactions into place? I'm dealing with the finite material stuff, and that's the wrong place to be. The right place is to catalog it, know what you're dealing with, but you just utter, like to the universe, you say, well, this is beyond me. This is the universe's business, so I release it and allow the answer to come to me. And that's what's been happening big time in the last year.
How did
it can happen.
How did you use your scientific background?
That's the question. We've touched on it. It's the Talmud, the Talmudic approach. You don't much associate something out of Judeo-Christian history with science. But that's how I got a PhD, from professors who, they didn't advertise themselves as masters of the Talmudic approach to science. They just were. And they can be rough on you, at least it feels emotionally rough, when they're giving you the questions you must answer in order to make progress. And that happened in the middle of having discovered some intermediate cobalt cyanide complexes I was able to generate with 14 million electron volt electrons from an accelerator at Argonne National Laboratory, and was able to use the optoelectronic equipment to actually get the spectrum of short-lived intermediates I was generating in my reaction cell. That's as technical as I need to get, but there's a way to get photographs, Polaroids, the old Polaroid photographs. Now we have electronics, but my professor and I reviewed the photographs on a time scale. We could adjust the time scale to look at your reaction on a millisecond, microsecond, nanosecond time scale. And my professor, Dr. Jack Halpern, said, well, Grant, what is this little signal showing up on the photograph? I said, I don't know. I think it's X, Y, and Z. And he says, but X, Y, and Z would behave thus and so. What he did, he didn't know, but he knew how to get me to know so that both of us could know. He kept asking the same darn question every 3 days. That's the whole crux of the Talmudic approach that the rabbis developed to re-examine the scriptures over a 3,000-year period. What is true and what changes in its truth, or does it change? So after that, that's how I got it. You can't get that out of, you have to come through your own mind to get there, and you can't question yourself. You have to stay firmly footed in your principles of existence. I can't explain it any more than that.
You said one word that I feel is very impactful: re-examine. Re-examine. You look at something, but go back and look at it again. Whatever it is, a situation, even with your internet cell phone bill challenge.
That's right.
It looks like you re-examined that a number of times, and instead of making a rash decision to pay or just send money where it could have went to
That's
hackers,
right.
You went to the source. You went right to the company, which I give you a lot of credit. Getting them on the line.
I did. I learned to do that as a child. My mother and father did that. They didn't do it out of anger or anything vindictive. And I learned how to be very peaceful in that approach, to ask the right questions, and the answers would come. I dare not call that magic, because it's bigger than that. It's intuition, which many people dearly love to have. And they can't.
Love that word, and I've used it more and more in my personal and professional life. Intuition. Next time we get together, do you think that we could look at that word and what it means and how it supports us?
Yes. Yes.
Because it's one of those things that, like the black hole, I can't touch it, feel it. I can't see it. Maybe you can see it in some regards, but your intuition, it's one of those, call it a power. I don't even know what to call it, but I know, or I feel it does exist. It's something that we have that supports us.
Well, let's do that. We will do that.
I'd love to. Your memoir is available everywhere. Check it out on Amazon.
Google it. Whatever search engine you use is on Apple. It's on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble. Venerable. Footprints in the Chaotic Unknown is what I observed just doing the memoir. I said, golly, I've been through all these unknowns and didn't have a clue as to how to get through them. But answers came to me as I began to let go to higher truths that I could access within myself.
That title, Footprints in the Chaotic Unknown, just remains to be relevant in all these situations. Even your cell phone internet situation, you laid some footprints down to the higher ups there, and it was a chaotic unknown. You were left without any internet. You had work to do. We were going to go on the air. We couldn't. Love it. We got to run. We're out of time. But Grant Venerable, Professional of the Year. Take a look for it, and we'll get together.
This was great, Stephen.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be right back. Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Let's go inside the mind of a 10-year-old.
I should have worn those earrings today. I like those earrings. Gabby has those awesome earrings. I need to ask her where she got those, but that's just what she would want me to do. I'll have Michaela ask her for me.
Buckle up, Sarah.
Yeah, but then Michaela will be like, why don't you just ask her yourself? That's just like Michaela.
Sarah, buckle up.
Michaela's such a great name. I wish I was called Michaela. There's like a dozen Sarahs in my class.
Hey, we're not hitting the road until you buckle up, honey.
Oh yeah, seatbelt. I forget sometimes because my brain is like busy, you know? I wonder if there's pizza at school today.
Sometimes it can be tough to get through to your kids, but it's not impossible. Always make sure they're wearing their seatbelts, even on short drives. Remember, you have the keys, you have the power. Never give up until they buckle up. A message from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council. Visit safercar.gov/kidsbuckleup for more information.